All right, Knights, you are in for a treat. We have our very first ever Deadlight Nerd panel that we're moderating with two amazing guests. The first one is Robert W. Ross. He is the author of the #1 best-selling Sentinels of Creation print and audiobook series, the first book in his new sci-fi series, Paradigm 2045 Trinity's Children, which was released fall of 2020. Robert's most recent book, A Scion of Amberlight, Book 6 in the Sentinels of Creation series, was released on March 9th, 2021, and currently boasts a 4.9 on audible.com. For Robert, the magic is the product of his personal collaboration and friendship with narrator Nick Podehl. Speaking of Nick, he's our second guest. Nick has been described as a treasure. The man with a voice like silk and honey gives voice to a multitude of characters that heretofore only existed on the page. By night, he balances the time as a husband, dad, and amateur armchair general. His castle stands proudly in the Mitten State, where he hopes for snow each and every day. Hope you enjoy it, and we'll catch you on the flippity flip. I work at a gym, and some lady's like, "You have a voice for the radio," and I'm like, "I have a podcast," and she's like, "Good enough."
I think she said you have a face for the radio, not a voice.
I saw that low going up like this. I was like,
so I started recording. So whenever you guys want to start, we can. Did you want to do? Johnny and I always do a little bit of vocal warm up. I think Nick doesn't need to do any. We know that, but Johnny and I always do a little bit.
I want the sweater reveal on video.
Yeah, I agree.
Oh, now that you mention it, it is a little warm here in the basement, surrounded by all this knowledge and learning. I should probably take my sweatshirt off.
There it is.
Oh, yes. In all its glory.
Beautiful.
product placement.
That's right. Now, is this merch that people can buy?
Not right now. We're going to set it up so it is eventually.
Okay. Whatever you do, don't switch your vendor, whoever you have making your shirts. This is seriously the softest, most comfortable T-shirt I own.
So,
wow.
Not that we're recording a podcast or anything, but it is printful, and the option that we picked for that was like one of their cheaper shirts. Like, it's incredible.
Right, so you're doing this whole thing wrong. It's really expensive product. We just cut the deal price for all of our fans. We take a loss in every shirt because we love you so much.
Exactly. That's really the truth. I just didn't want my fans to feel bad, We didn't want them to feel guilty when they spend so little on us.
I know, because the last time we talked, we were like, conventions will be back, and it seems like conventions will be back in some places, so we're excited. So we're hoping to meet people at conventions, because you're at Dragon Con, right? Is that still when you guys were shooting for?
Dragon Con looks like it's going to happen. I'm still booked at Liberty Con, which is in June. Wow. So I'm still planning to go to that. I got my first COVID shot today, so I'm like, my left arm
not dead.
He's not dead.
But that was it. That was the bar. I said, Nick, if I don't talk to you again, brother, I love you.
Deuces.
So, speaking of which, let's kind of start to get into some of our more predetermined podcast. Some of the things Johnny and I have been talking about, what we kind of wanted to ask you guys when we got you back on. Robert was our more recent guest. Nick was on, I think it's not quite been a year, but it's been a while. It's been months.
Mm-hmm. At least a decade, at least.
At least a decade. And Nick, I think you are our most popular video on YouTube, FYI. You have crushed it. No, seriously. Like, I think people are just searching your name constantly because, yeah. One of the most commented ones, too. So it's kind of fun.
Well deserved. I joke because he's 1/10 of a star better narrator than I am a writer. So
1/10. It's a big 10th.
Well,
though.
I mean, I'm lucky that it's only a 10th. Yeah, there it is. Performance excellent. Story.
That hit me was really funny. So how did you guys meet though? That's kind of, as we jump into this podcast, I was just curious, how did you two become acquainted with one another? And who initiated it?
He picked me up at a bar. Yeah, he picked me up at a bar.
Every great story.
No. I was writing back in 2015, And I had decided that when I started writing seriously, that I wanted to do audio first, meaning I wanted to write the prose that would easily translate into audio, which we could get into what that means a little later if you're interested. But so I was getting towards the tail end of A Power Renewed, which is the first book of the Sentinels of Creation series. And I figured, since this is audio, I better start looking for a narrator. And at the time, I was just finishing maybe my second read through of Name of the Wind, or maybe we had moved on to Wise Man's Fears. And so I said, I think that Nick would do a good job with translating the female and male characters. So I thought I'd just reach out to him. So I just wrote to him. I was like, hey, would you be interested in doing a story with me? And he just wrote back and said, yeah, I'd love to do it. So it was really as uneventful as that.
So Nick, you were just sitting there and got an email, and there's no more to this story you want to add?
Really, the only thing that I would add is that I had just started at that point working with independent authors. Up until that point, I had only barely stuck my toes into the self-recording avenue. It had been all with larger publishing companies like the Audible and Brilliance and things like that. And when Robert emailed me, I was at a point where I didn't have a lot of projects going on. And so I didn't know anything about him. I had never read any of his material, but he just kind of sent me a quick little blurb about what the story was about and kind of what he was looking for. And I was like, yeah, okay, let's do it. I don't know you, but yeah.
Go ahead.
So yeah, we started emailing back and forth, and then we talked on the phone a few times, and got a sense pretty early on that this was going to be a pretty close collaboration kind of work, that he wanted to be a part of the process. And what I was used to at that point was just a production manager saying, here's your script, you're going to go in the booth at this time, make us a book. And I didn't really have a lot of contact with authors at that point. And so I was excited about the opportunity to get to work closely with the person who had created the material.
That's cool. So two of our questions, just kind of in the same vein, knowing that you and Robert are friends, we had two questions from our last cast that people drilled us on. So one of them you may not be able to answer, but one I think you can. So the first one was, have you ever met Patrick Rothfuss in person? And then the second one is, are you going to do the third book when it comes out?
So I have never met Patrick Rothfuss. My dad did, though, because he had him bring. My dad brought one of the print copies of Name of the Wind to a book signing that he was doing in, I think, Madison, because both my dad and I believe, at least at the time, Patrick Rothfuss lived in Wisconsin. And so he actually got to meet him and sign a book for him and say, hey, this is for my son, Nick Podehl. And he's like, okay, thanks. And, signed him. And he's like, yeah, he narrated your audiobooks. He's like, oh. So kind of a. That's
really funny, actually.
There, but well, I mean, not too many people have heard the name Podehl, so it's not a common name, But yeah, so I've never met him. I also do not know whether or not I will be narrating the third book. As far as I know, the manuscript is still in process, and so once that gets finalized, and depending upon which company he goes with to produce it, they will cast it. And so I hope they cast me, but I don't know.
Riots in the street if they don't. John and I will be leading them.
Leading the way.
Maybe not that dramatic. Riots on Reddit. Riots on Reddit if they don't.
There we go.
That's more meaningful.
Yeah,
probably better.
Actually, it can cause more havoc sometimes. You guys see GameStop?
Right?
True.
So, Robert, have you and Nick Robert, have you and Nick met in person at all?
Yeah, several times. In fact, we had moved into we had downsized into our current home, which we lovingly call our hobbit hole now because it's a little cottagey thing. And so I had a spare bedroom that had nothing in it except a TV, which I would shunt one of my kids in when they were making too much noise. Like, go play in the guest room. Like, how's the guest room? There's no bed in it. So Nick and his family came down to visit, and so I had to turn it into a real bedroom. So I finally had an excuse, and we got a nice bed, and all of a sudden got good stuff. And then he and the girls and his wife came, and my daughter showed up at the door because my daughter likes to cosplay, and she cosplayed as Ariel. So when they
land walking Ariel,
land walking Ariel, as opposed to, she wasn't flopping around on the ground going, "Oh my God, where are my legs?
I can't breathe."
That would not have been good for the girls, I think.
No.
So yeah, they opened the door and Ariel greeted them, and it's we have the video of it. It's adorable, and they're so shy and little and adorable. And now when we see each other, they go running up to Autumn, and that's my daughter, and leap into her arms. And occasionally they'll get to me. But yeah, so I guess that's a long way to yes, we've met several times. Our families are well intertwined.
Yep, he is Uncle Robert.
Awesome.
So
yes, and they are my grandlings.
They are, yep, grandlings.
So as you were setting all this up, were you technically a self-publisher at the time? Would you be classified as that? Or?
Yeah, I think for the first couple of visits. So now I'm kind of hybrid. So I have one series with a publisher and one by myself. So I could kind of kick around the experience between the two of them. But yeah, at the time, just my own publishing company.
That's cool.
Yeah,
that's really cool. I'm trying to think. Were there a common interest that you guys had that kind of laid the groundwork for this friendship to bed? And is it common for narrators and authors to be friends? Those are my two questions for you.
So I don't know too many narrators who are close friends with authors. There's got to be some.
Right.
But I don't know if it's the norm to, go on family vacations together or anything like that. Robert, a bunch of authors, so you might be able to speak to this, but
no, I think it's more. I don't know of any either, and I think it's more we just kind of clicked and had similar nerdtastic interests. I've built a tunnel system underneath my house to a variety of houses in the neighborhood. So when Nick finally picks one, we'll be able to do tabletop games underneath the houses without our respective wives finding us. So it's just a matter of time.
In the nerd bunker.
Yes.
Man, between your writing and Nick's voices, you could have some serious Dungeons and Dragons and Magic card games going. You know that? Some intense stuff. There will be reports on the neighborhood of strange, noises coming from underneath the street and stuff. It's going to turn into like a Stranger Things vibe.
Very, very true. Especially since Nick has gotten more into Warhammer. I'm still a neophyte of neophytes, but they're much more, I think, scary sounding than the games we were playing, which was more Napoleonic. So
right.
But he did name the army after Shannon, so they're the Sisters of Saint Shannon, which is funny because I don't think that Shannon would qualify for sainthood anytime soon.
Well, at least Kellen would say that.
Yes, if he knew it was good for him.
Is there any? So me and Jay, we originally bonded because of Skyrim. Not really, but we did. He did one time come up to me. He's like, "Have you played Skyrim?" And I almost backhanded him. Like, "Are you kidding? I am Skyrim." Yeah, exactly.
Get out of here with that.
Talk to me till you get to level 100. And he's like, "What's that?" Did you guys do that too? Because the one thing this pandemic did do, it helped me like rekindle online playing with friends or playing modded Skyrim. I did that the other day. I didn't even do anything. I walked around for 6 hours and just mod it, and then like, I don't want this. Have you been able to do that lately with you guys? Have you been able to interact that way?
Well, actually, this last summer, so during the first sort of move down in the COVID cases, but we were still all kind of locked in. I got into Warhammer, which, if your listeners are not familiar, it's a tabletop war game, and I play Warhammer 40K, which is the sci-fi variant of it. And I dove hard into it, which, we've got a lot more time, so I have a lot more time to cut out and glue and paint models. But I actually convinced Robert to play some war games with me, because at the beginning of COVID, I was just doing Napoleonic war games. I'm a cheapskate, so I wouldn't buy any of the actual legit miniatures. I'd go out to thrift stores and try to salvage Risk games and paint those little tiny figures. And told Robert about it. He's like, "Oh, that sounds really cool. We should try to do that." And so we brainstormed on how we could come up with a way to play remotely. And I actually set up a war room in my office with a webcam and my iPad over here and my iPhone over here. So we had like different angles that he could jump to and stuff. And he would tell me, "Okay, move this unit toward the bridge." And that's what I would do. And so, I mean, like, we were playing together, but it was just me down in my basement, in my office, moving all the pieces around, and Robert's calling the shots from his home in Atlanta. So
it was a lot of fun. In fact, we were kicking around doing a Patreon of that, because and having people be able to join in these games and so forth. And we still might do it, but it was surprisingly functional. We ended up doing having a Discord server and having multiple cameras, and had we had a couple of Nick's friends play as well. So we had different armies on this terrain, and of course Nick is like Henry Cavill, looks just like him too. So I mean, sometimes I can't tell them apart.
I saw him take off that sweater.
That's right. So you see a picture of Henry Cavill like painting this little miniature, and my daughter's like, "How is this man not married?" And so Nick's similar in that he can make these terrains. And I'm like, "How the heck did you do that? It looks just like it's made out of stone." He said, "Oh, it was a milk carton, or no, it was an egg carton, and I just painted it with this, and all of a sudden it looks like a castle." I'm like, "Yeah." And so he has this whole terrain set up, and we were able to play and have the different angles, like move to camera 2, and it was just a lot of fun. I'm still more partial to the Napoleonics because I understand it a little more. Although the Sisters of St. Shannon's are pretty cool looking. I'll give them that.
You guys have me intrigued. I'm feeling like I need to research this a little bit more.
I think you might have to.
100%. Because Johnny and I, this is right in our vein. This is our bread and butter.
Well, we'll
maybe
over Skype, and it worked great. So keep us going.
Right. Maybe for some bonus material at the end of the podcast, I can take you guys on a quick tour of the war room.
Ooh,
that'd be
amazing.
Sick.
Put it on our
Twitch.
See
the setup.
Crazy. Yeah. We're real talented.
It's really not that impressive.
Yes, it is. It's pretty cool. And we tried different things first, because we tried Zoom first, because it was free because of the pandemic. And then it stopped being free and we're cheap. So we're like, well, that's out. And then we tried something else that didn't work because I think it was something that had a timer on it. And then my son actually came in and was like, well, what? Hey, Boomer, why don't you use Discord? But like,
hey,
we were thinking about it.
Johnny and I get it. We tried using a few different things, and they kept losing our audio or whatever, like the original audio and the backup. I'm like, you got to be kidding me. So we just jumped back to Zoom. We're like, I'll pay it because it's not worth the time to lose my flipping audio. I lose my mind.
Sure.
I'm about to throw my computer into the wall. Zero patience. I'm gonna go full. Oh no, I can't be blanking on this. The Russian security officer.
Misha.
Thank you, Misha. On the spot, sometimes names escape me. I was about to go full Misha on my computer last time it happened. Oh, I'm sure Skype will work. Take this, Barbie, as I punch the computer.
Yeah, speaking of Misha, just we were a couple hours ago. We had friends over, and they were talking about, because they heard one of them is a beta reader for me, and Rachel had mentioned, my wife Rachel had mentioned, just like, Svetlana would, because this woman was mentioning Svetlana, a woman that she works with named Svetlana, and Rachel goes, Svetlana would have been a good name for that character in your book, and everybody turned to her and was like, no, this is why you're not the writer. Svetlana. No, Svetlana. You picture Svetlana in your head, and this is probably going to insult a whole bunch of Svetlanas, I'm sure. But I see Svetlana as kind of more of a Gina Carano type person, like a big person that's like going to take you and turn you into a little pretzel. Whereas Misha will still turn you into a pretzel, but she's the kind of person where you're like, wonder what happened. You look down and there was like a knife wound that you took 3 minutes ago that you didn't even know happened. And she kind of like weaved in there and stuck you. So just two completely different character traits based on the name. So my wife got knocked down pretty hard, actually.
Boo! Immediately.
Exactly.
I just imagine the whole room just turning with a little drop, like, what did you say?
Yeah.
Burn her anyway.
She's a witch.
So speaking of your current projects, tell us, let's do some shameless plugs real quick of we kind of talked about how you guys met. Johnny, should we jump into kind of where we're at right now?
Yeah, let's do current events.
Current events.
Okay. Well, Nick just finished a couple of weeks ago the 6th book in the Sentinels of Creation series, the second to last book. And it's called The Scion of Amber Light. And it just launched Tuesday. So today is Thursday the 11th. So it launched on Tuesday the 9th. So it's just a baby crawling around. I'm really happy with all the reviews it's gotten so far, and the people that have been commenting about it. So yeah, I'm excited about it. I have a copy of it. I have a beat up copy because the print ones I haven't even gotten my print copies yet. This is actually, I showed this to you guys earlier. This is for those people who are watching. This is a beta copy. So when I do my books, I have an alpha version, which is where very, very mean people tell me all the things I really screwed up. And then after I fix that, I have a beta to 5 different people. And then they send me back smaller things that I screwed up. And if you can see, I don't know, because I have an old MacBook, see every one of those little dog ears? Every one of those is where I screwed up. Every single one.
And this is the beta.
Beta. But that's the cover, and it's pretty cool. I'm really digging how people are liking it, and a lot of them are making the same comments that I'm making. Does it have to end with the next one? And I'm like, yeah, it really does. So it's I'm probably gonna have all the feels as well, but I'm really committed to. I have people go, this one was my favorite, and that one's my favorite. I'm really gonna try to have the 7th book. And I shouldn't even talk about it because I'm talking about the 7th book when the 6th one just came out 3 days ago. But the 7th book, I'm really working hard because I started on it, and I go full bore on it starting Monday. I really want to try to make that one the best of it, so that everybody, kind of says the same thing. This one was my favorite. So each character gets their moment in the sun as you go through this last story and tie it all together. I got just stacks of notes that I've taken over the last 6 years of like, put this in the last book, put this in the last book. So it's going to be a lot of work.
Now, Sentinels of Creation, so it's going to be 7 books to finish, and it's urban fantasy. Do you mind? I know what urban fantasy is, but I don't know if our listeners do.
I'll play devil's advocate. What is urban fantasy?
I really don't know if Johnny knows.
It's interesting because it's a subgenre. So you have fantasy, and then there's subgenres underneath that, and it's kind of been refined a little bit. So I think it's more. I think the current terminology is mine would fall more into contemporary fantasy than urban fantasy. But the two of them, the overlap between the two is it's fantastical elements set in the more mundane world. So technically, Harry Potter could easily be urban fantasy because you have these magical elements but people could have iPhones, right? And so urban fantasy, some of the people that have defined it is where it's kind of more in an actual urban environment. And mine takes place really in a suburban and all sorts of different environments. Sometimes it's even in rural, but it's set in 2020 through actually it's set 2015 through 2022 is really the setting for the book. So it's a contemporary time, which makes it fun because you can juxtapose magic and magical elements with modern day technology. So that's one of the things I really like to play with is and Nick does a great job because one of my favorite characters is the AI character Jarvis, who he used to be the first self-aware aspect of IBM's Watson, and the character kind of works on it and helps him become self-aware. And Kellen stumbles into him and he's like, "Oh, you mean like the AI in Iron Man?" And the other character is like, no, don't say that to him. And then the AI refuses to acknowledge being called anything but that because he, over the last 30 seconds, watched all 3 Iron Man movies and is like, "That's really cool. I want to be him," which really pissed off the guy that created him. Was like, I don't want to call you Jarvis. And he's like, "That's too bad. That's who I am now."
I like that. I was about to say that same thing. Jarvis, like I know that one.
Yeah. So Nick does a really good Jarvis.
Can we hear a little bit of Jarvis real quick, Nick, on the spot? Sorry. Nick on the spot.
I can't believe you would put me on the spot like that. That's very unfortunate that you would do this to me. Kellen,
I love it.
What is happening, Kellen?
That's so good.
This is why we can't have you visit us, because me and Jay will just be sitting. Okay, do this voice. Okay, do that. Okay, say this.
I think
for 5 hours straight.
What did he say? Do it, monkey boy. I think that was the expression he used on our last cast as we were trying
Dance,
to get him to
monkey
voices.
boy, dance.
Yeah, exactly. Right? Do you have a favorite voice, Nick, in the Sentinels of Creation series?
Ooh, man.
Or is there one that you're proud of? You're like, yeah, that one came good.
I'm trying to think. I love so many of the characters that are in there that I have a really hard time picking a favorite. Like with most books that I do, there's clearly like one where I'm just like, yep, that's my favorite right there. With Sentinels, I mean, I've said this in a lot of the posts that I've made about the books when they're released, and when people ask me like, hey, what's one of your favorite books? What should I listen to? I continually comment on how the characters that Robert has written are so just full and real that I feel like I know them. Like I've said it before that like I feel like Kellen and Shannon come over for dinner and game nights at my house. I mean, they're like people that I would know. And so for me, it's not the same as another book because these characters are almost real to me, which I know makes me sound a little bit crazy, but they're not just characters that I'm doing a, fun voice for. So I don't know if I would be able to pin that one down as far as like a favorite. I don't know, Robert, do you have any thoughts on like things that I have said before that it's like, oh yeah, this one was one that you really had fun doing?
You seem to have fun with all of them.
I do, and that's the problem.
Yeah, now Rachel has a favorite. My wife has a favorite. She loves Don McLeod. She can't get enough of Don McLeod, especially when he talks about Uskaval. So Don McLeod
is
that's it. He's Shannon's 13th century dad, and he lives life hard and wanted to burn Kellen as a witch.
Going back
did
to
not
that.
go over well for their first meeting. Yeah. So he was none too happy about that, but I think that's Rachel's favorite because he's a lot of fun.
I think honestly, the ones that I have the most, I'll say, fun with are the like tertiary characters that come up in the series, where they're either based off of like a historical personage or a real world influence goes into those characters, and I get to really flesh them out and bring them to life. I think that those are some of the ones that I have the most fun with, just because there's a lot more leeway with what we can do with them.
Yeah, that's a great point. So there's a character in this book in a Scion of Amber Light. That's the one that just came out. That because we spend some time doing voice studies together with each book, and some of them are generic, and then some of them we spend more time on too. And one of them was we patterned it after Churchill. Love that one. And so that one was a lot of fun because he just was very, very Churchill. And then there was another one on my Patreon. One of the tiers that people can choose is they can choose and have a character that they can have created and inserted into the story. Not just like a name, but an actual character. We work on a little bit, and Nick did voice this character, Charlie Wells, who's in A Scion of Amber Light, who was the grandfather of one of the patrons on my Patreon. And Charlie had a really interesting life. He, lied about his age to get into World War One, helped build the Titanic, and just had really a very colorful life. So we placed him in a Scottish bar. He was Scottish, in a Scottish pub. Got to interact with the Fae. And we didn't actually spend a whole lot of time figuring out what his voice should be, but the patron, Pete, who, so this is Pete's grandfather, when he heard it, he said that, he said two things, and they were just, and I shared this with Nick today, and I commented about why I treasure so much Nick's and my partnership in this, is because he said to me, I'd never met my grandfather until today, which was really gratifying and humbling to me because my words helped him meet his grandfather, who I'd never met. And then he said, and Nick sounded just like my dad, who passed away a week before. So Nick's voicing, who he had no idea how to voice him except the background of the character, and so his voicing sounded like Pete's dad, and my words introduced him to his grandfather. And that's that tight partnership that really has developed over the 6 years or so that Nick and I worked together. Plus, I think a little bit of spiritual providence. I'm Catholic, and I believe in a lot of different spiritual involvement in some of my writing. And the fact that we were able to do that for Pete, I think, was really impactful.
That's so cool. I almost don't know what to say. Awesome. Like, it's a little too, I can't comment on it without...
Too deep for the...
Yeah, exactly.
Sorry.
You promised lighthearted.
No, that was really
beautiful.
cool.
No, it really was really cool because, some guy probably was like, oh, yeah, I'll contribute. And then he got a better gift. It was awesome.
Well, and I can relate to that. So my grandfather, all my grandparents are dead. I don't know what's going on with my family. I tell my wife, you're going to have to live a lot of years after me because they're all dying early in my family. I don't know what's going on. And every time she hates the joke.
Yeah, no, they don't like that at all.
No,
they use that regularly.
I hope you like being a young widow. She doesn't look forward to that. So
they don't laugh.
I think they universally hate that.
Yeah,
I think it's a universal wife thing. I think they all hate it.
But I hear a lot in my family that I look like my grandfather. So I'm the tallest of my siblings, and my grandfather was really tall, and really no one else in my family is super tall, and they just say my mannerisms and stuff remind me of him. So that's kind of cool. I can relate to that desire to want to meet him because I never met him. He passed away when I was so tiny. But that's kind of it's interesting that you can even do that. It's almost something like stranger than fiction or what's the term? It's so cool that it couldn't be written. Someone couldn't come up with this kind of thing in terms of, I don't know, his father just passed away and how it all kind of rolled out. It's divine. We'll call
Hollywood
it that.
Ending. Hollywood ending.
Providence.
Yeah, Providence. Right. I love that. Thank you, Johnny. So moving on to a, I don't know, Johnny, do you have any follow up to that?
Well, I was like, it's a little too chummy here. Now, me and Jay get along great, but sometimes he grinds my gears. Tell me one time at least, did you guys, like Robert writes something, Nick's like, I don't want to read this, or did you read something and you're like, no, come on, Nick, a little different the voice. Did you ever, at least a little bit, give us something to ruin this perfect harmony?
All right, you got to go first, Nick. That way I'll be a little less mean than you. And that way I'll look better.
Okay, I'll make you look better. All right, here we go. So Robert mentioned character studies. Yeah. We'll do character studies where I'll outline all of the characters that I need to know, like what thoughts do you have? What do you want them to sound like? And he'll send me video clips and stuff of different actors or portrayers, be like, I think they have this tone, but do it with this accent. Which is great. I love having info like this, but it's don't worry, this is gonna get not nice. So far, it's all really nice. But so on some of the characters, Robert will get pretty particular, and I think that your alpha readers help, where they have very specific ideas in mind, and if I don't nail it, it's sometimes like maybe 4 or 5 different iterations that we have to do. And it's like, okay, I like the tone of number 1, but the timbre of number 3. And can you combine it with the cadence of number 2? And at this point, I'm just like,
that's when I remind him how much he loves me.
And it's true. I do. Because I don't do that for everybody.
No. It's also when I link to the video, the audio song of I forget the comedian's name, but he's got a song and he goes, "I'm an asshole. I'm an asshole."
That's Dennis Leary.
Dennis Leary. That's it. Dennis Leary. Yep. That's that 50-plus-year-old brain of mine forgetting things already. Yeah.
That's also though before. When it was okay to be politically incorrect. So,
yeah, I don't think he could get away with that song anymore.
Nope.
It's probably been scrubbed.
I think so.
You have to get in the dark web now. Yep.
Yep.
Yes.
All right, Robert, your turn.
I don't know.
His voice was horrible. He admitted it. He's gonna say it.
What's that?
I was going to say Jarvis. You hated Jarvis all along.
No.
The whole time he's thinking, I really should have cast Paul Bettany for this book.
Yes. And he was available, too. I honestly, I don't really have anything.
Oh, come on.
Why don't you tell me something that should annoy me about you, and then I'll agree. I'm just not being that creative.
I don't know.
See?
I do not stick well to deadlines.
I was gonna say, does that mess you up? Like throws off your timing a little, Robert, just to get.
Okay.
Only a lot. Only a lot.
That's fair.
The capriciousness of an artist throws off your timelines. So there you go.
All right, so that's fair. So that's not annoying. It can be frustrating, right? But the problem is that the alternative is that you don't get the work done, right? So it's it's not entirely fair because I put extra work on top of the project, right? So if I were to just give the manuscript, and I've said this to him before, it's like, because he's like, oh, I'm going to be late, or it's not done, or this or that, and I'm like, okay, well that's fair. And like the Sentinels books are supposed to come out each January. And, I'm not great at math, but month 3 is greater than month 1, right? So in the same token, just a little bit, but in the same token, he's got all these other things, stacked up. And like we talked about at the beginning of the podcast, like, hey, I just wrote to him. I was like, hey, you want to do this book? And he's like, yeah, let's do this book. Now it's like, hey, do you want to do this book? Yeah, let's do this book in 2035. So I'm lucky that I'm grandfathered in because it doesn't matter, right? Because that he's booked out, right? Which is great for him and the family and everything else. And it's great for me because I'm already in it. So, but it'd be faster if I just said, here's the manuscript, figure out what voice you want, and I'll see you in 3 weeks. But we don't. We spend time with the audio, and we spend time with the characters. And I did save some time this time because Nick will usually have it proofed. So after I've done proofing it, he'll have someone proof it as well. But we skipped that whole step this time. And Nick was like, I remember, Nick, you were like, are you sure you don't want me to have it proofed? I'm like, nah, because I proofed it. I've had 2 other people proof it, and we should just cut to the chase and get through. Because anything that someone would find proofing it, they're going to read through the manuscript and look at the manuscript while they're listening, right? And as I said, whether I used a plural there or it was is versus are, as long as it sounds good to the listener, it's fine. And I didn't even realize that some of these changes were there until I would look at the manuscript while listening, and I'd catch more things than I ever caught before. And some of the things were just stupid and little. Then sometimes, like he turned Kellen into a woman, and that wasn't as good. Don't be misgendering Kellen. Those things need to get fixed, but a lot of the little things don't. So we saved some time that way.
But it does show, because I'm super new to audiobooks. Jay got me into it, and I always said that Nick was the sound of my voice, the soundtrack of my summer, last summer. And you do notice, and then I got into it. I was reading a lot of The Sword of Truth, and then they switched narrators, and you're like, you can tell they were just reading it out loud. They didn't care. They didn't keep the same voice, and then it was the same narrator, and he switched it up. So you can really, really tell the passion that goes through. So I appreciate it as a listener.
Well,
yeah,
I'm glad that it comes through.
I can see that I would probably be annoying to work, because they birth these babies, and we've gotten a lot easier though. I think this one was pretty easy.
Oh yeah. I think we went through 1 round of character selection and creation this time. So.
Yeah. And the 7th one, I think, is going to be even easier because there are no new characters at all in the 7th book.
Yeah, you said that with this one, though.
I'm a liar.
And there were like a dozen.
I'm a dirty liar. Just wait till you get to Humanity's Promise, man. Humanity's Promise. I actually, when I was writing that one, I came out and I talked to Rachel, and I was like, I'm feeling really bad because I've added 12 new characters to this book. And she's like, Nick will know. It'll be fine.
For our listeners, what's Humanity's Promise? Can you give us a quick?
So the book behind you is the first book. Yeah, that's Johnny behind. Yeah, that's Trinity's Children. That's the first book in the sci-fi book. The Humanity's Promise. That's this one.
Can't wait
The band's. It's glossy. The band's on it because this is a beta book. This is the one that went out to all the beta readers. And this is one that's published by Podium. And Podium likes longer books. And look what I did to myself.
Oh my god!
Look at that.
How many words is that?
It's 205,000.
That's long.
Wow.
So I was talking to a beta reader, and he's like, "Wow, he's like, what are you channeling, Robert Jordan?" I was like, "I wish." And he's like, "This is big," and I was like, "Really bad business decision," because I had someone coach me on this because somebody said, "Hey, you want some free advice?" I'm like, "Sure." And he's like, "You need to write smaller books and release them every 6 months." And I'm like, "Yeah, but they're not. I can't really get in. The characters can't create." It's like, "Oh, that doesn't matter. It's a matter of whether you want to make money or not." I'm like, "I would like to make some money." But those two things aren't always kind of simpatico. Is that this will take forever. If I were to make it half as thick, then I could write it twice as fast, right? But this is how long it ended up being, and it was what the story needed. But so that's the second book. That one's coming out in August, and since that one it's a Podium audio book, so they'll be cranky with Nick instead of me being cranky with Nick.
Mm-hmm.
So, but they'll be cranky with me as well, right? So I'm on a deadline. I have to have this manuscript done by June. I'm on track though, so that's good. So I get it done by June 15th, and then I guess Nick starts it whenever he starts it, sometime early August, and so that it gets out the door at the end of August, which is when it's going to come out, because it's supposed to be out just in time for Dragon Con.
So 205,000. Sorry, Johnny, I gotta ask this question. It's right in my brain. Nick, how long will that take you to get through? Roughly, give us like just a general.
About 20 hours is 20 hours of audio right there.
And
so
how much of that, like, so you say 20 hours, like, is that what we're going to see on Audible? It'll say 20 hours, or is that how much time you spend in the booth? Both? Or?
Nope, that's how much is going to be listed on Audible when you buy it, is 20 hours of audio. In the booth, it'll probably take me 3 or 4 times that.
And then do you edit your own material? Or do you have an editor?
I have somebody else who proofs it. Well, I mean, if I'm working like with Podium, say, they have a proofer. I do what's called...
I want to be hired as a proofer.
That's right.
New position. I just love that word.
I do what's called punch and roll editing. So basically, when I know I've made a mistake, I just go back to the nearest gap that I can find that's going to sound good, and then punch in and keep going. So I'll do a little bit of on-the-fly editing, but not much. I leave that to the professionals, the people who they went through the schooling to earn the rights to be able to be audio engineers, because it's complicated stuff. So.
Me over here who edits the podcast, I think I can figure it out. I'm just making stuff up.
You just say we're always perfect. No edit needed.
What's funny is, like, I've spent hours editing some of our podcasts, like, to make it really sound good, and people didn't even comment on it. They didn't even notice the difference. And I was like, you know what? I'm just going to crank that volume up and call it good. Forget you guys.
That's the thing, though. That's the thing, though, is I feel like with audio work, if nobody notices the work that you put into it, you did your job well.
I guess that's true.
Because people are going to hear any of the mistakes that you make. They are not going to hear
the good stuff,
how seamlessly you did your job. So the fact that nobody's commented on either like how great it sounds compared to your old stuff, it's like, well, then that just means you've been sounding good from the beginning.
Right. I figured out a good balance where I don't spend 20 hours on one cast.
That's
Audible is very, very particular, right? So they have a pretty high standard in terms of bit rate and all this other kind of complicated stuff that I don't understand. So you have to get that right, otherwise they'll reject it. And once it gets rejected, I have some author friends of mine whose their audiobook got rejected, and it's a mess because her second book is out in audio and her first one isn't, which is not ideal.
Right.
Because it failed some sort of Audible quality check. So it's now, once the workflow breaks, I think, then like everybody's like, what happened? What do we do? They don't have they may not have a real good process for looping it back in or something. I don't know. So you really don't want to have that. And Nick's engineer is rock solid. I mean, he's gotten it. And even with these crazy things that I do on the independent stuff, like voice blends where multiple people are talking and we blend them together. And then when we talked about this, I think Jay last time when was it Wizard Soul, the third book, when you were singing as the women? I think it was Wizard Soul. Yeah, it was because of the epilogue when Kelly and Shannon do that thing together. So Nick played the Haynes sisters from White Christmas singing to each other.
I remember
and they had to blend those two together, and that was just really tough because you got to be able to go right from one to the other and have it seamlessly seem like they're singing to each other when it's him singing himself. I still wish I had a video of him doing that, but his engineer just does a fantastic job. So shout out to Brian on that.
Right, but I mean, I can definitely appreciate the stringent qualities or stringent qualifications that the audiobook companies and like ACX, which is the platform that we use for the independent stuff. I can really appreciate the fact that they have those bars that need to be met, because it keeps somebody from, saying, well, I'm going to record an audiobook in my bathtub, and it's just, it's going to sound horrible. And as a listener, you're going to have to deal with all kinds of extraneous noises. And it really takes you out of the experience if you're listening to somebody who has, really like clicky mouth noises, or you can hear an air conditioner humming in the background, or you hear construction outside of wherever they're recording. It completely removes you from the experience. And so if you have those really just solid baseline requirements, it just improves the overall experience.
That makes sense.
Yeah. And you guys were talking about the length of this book. Is for me, I don't think I'll ever write one longer. I don't want to say ever, but I don't want to write one longer. Let me put it that way.
Come on, channel that inner Jordan. You're not even, those are rookie numbers, man. You got to crank that.
I've read all of his books, and I didn't feel like they were that long. It's like George R. R. Martin's are like tomes, right? But I didn't remember that Jordan's were that long. Because there's so many of them. Like,
I did.
Are they that long?
Oh yeah.
But Nick's done some that are 30, 40, 45 hours.
Longest that I've done is 47 and a half hours.
Yeah, I mean that's I don't think that I couldn't as a listener, I couldn't hold the thread that long. I'd be like, oh my God, are you done already? So I don't think I could hold anyone's attention, because I can't hold my own attention that long. So this is it, man. So for those people who are like, can you write longer? Because that's what I get on the Sentinels ones. Like the first Sentinels book was only 93,000 words. And each one, it's like a little Easter egg for folks. Each one's at least 10,000 words longer. Oh. I don't know why. So the next one is probably going to be like about 150,000 words. People consistently say, could you make them longer? Which is nice because they're enjoying the story. But for anybody that's asked, no. 205,000 limit. And that's with my alpha readers kicking out a chapter. They just ripped an entire chapter out after telling me it was horrible. I was an insult to all writers, and that I really was just a horrible human being in addition. They are sadists.
Sanderson calls it killing your darlings, because here you've put all this beautiful work into your darling, and some editor or some beta reader, whoever it is, some reader is going to come in and just kill that thing. And he's like, just let it happen. Kill your darling. It's fine.
It was, yeah. And who'd you say it was?
Brandon Sanderson says that all the time.
That's right. So that he said the same thing. We were talking about it at the last Dragon Con that was in person. And it was a really interesting conversation, because he said, so I was telling him about my wife and how mean she is. And he's like, there's three kinds of spouses. There's the cheerleader, the non-involver, and then your wife. So the cheerleader's like, this is awesome, you're doing great, honey, they're going to love this. And then the non-involver is like, I don't even want to be involved in this because I don't want to be the critic. And then my wife is like, can I tell you how much shit that is, please? But let me be clear, in case she watches this, she makes it so much better. Really has a great ear for things that are not right in terms of things that characters are like. She'll like in the paradigm, it's like, Amandi wouldn't say that. She'd say it like this. And it's a really very, very useful, super great, horrible experience to be in.
Refiner's
it's
fire.
like what I used to tell people about being a Marine Corps brat. Horrible place to be, great place to be from.
So as we've kind of been talking about editing stuff, recently I feel like an audiobook came out that kind of changed the game in some ways. It was called The Sandman. I don't know, Neil Gaiman's book. I don't know if you've heard little bits of it or not, but they've added in all this noise. So it's almost like it's a whole production. You have like chanting in the background at times, and other times you hear like car accidents, or you hear people in cars, or if they're on a train, you'll hear the in the background as the story's going. So all the time, it's almost like a play or something, or a movie with just the audio presented in a different light. Do you ever see either of you kind of using that in the future, or would that be something that basically the editor would decide? Just out of curiosity.
Robert, go ahead.
Yeah, I don't see myself doing it for a couple of reasons. One, that's a lot of extra work for somebody. And I think that's probably going to be reserved for the top tier of the top tier of authors, your J.K. Rowling's, your Neil Gaiman's. And, I think my work's pretty good, but I don't think the market has said that I'm not at that caliber, right? So to justify, it's like writing bigger books, right? I can't monetarily, artistically, I justify the length of the book because it's how long it needed to be. Artistically, but monetarily I can't, right? So Neil Gaiman can justify throwing an extra $50,000 worth of sound effects into a book because 1 million people are going to buy the book. Mm-hmm. And so someone's willing to throw that cash into it. I think that for my books, ask me after the first movie's made. Then they might be worthy of someone putting sound effects in the audiobooks.
Well, and that was another one of the questions I kind of was going to lob your way was any interest in, some authors I think are fearful of what would happen if they gave their movie, gave away movie rights or sold them, I should say. If someone approached you and said, hey, I want to make a movie out of it or a Netflix series or whatever it be, would you have any interest in that?
I would have interest, but I'm also gun shy. I had conversation like 4 or 5 Dragon Cons ago with Jim Butcher about that, and because he had his series option, and then created a sci-fi series, and then the option still I think was held for a while. It might still be held by somebody, I'm not sure. And so I would have to have some amount of control over it. And again, it probably makes it really unlikely because unless there is this huge groundswell of demand for my stories to be made in a movie, it's like you're a second tier writer if you're lucky, and you want control over this. We're freaking Netflix. You should be happy we're talking to you. It's kind of the attitude that I've gotten. Now, I was early on, right after Sentinels of Creation 1, somebody offered to option the books, but I had to give up film, movie, and marketing rights in perpetuity. And I'm like, that's totally. Now, if you don't know how you're going to make rent, right? And someone comes at you with $30,000, right? Mm-hmm. You might be like, well, I either don't eat or I give them this option, right? But fortunately, I was blessed to not be in that situation. So I was like, no, I'm not going to do that because you're just rolling the dice that if you do that enough times, that one of those is going to hit you $100 million, and then you're Star Wars, right? And then the creator of that has no control over what you do to his or her characters, and all of that marketing money, like for action figures and all that stuff, goes somewhere else. So I want to make sure that the characters were allowed to remain who they are. And for me, I'd also like the big to do now with Tolkien and the concern of big Tolkien fans of what will Amazon do, right? Mm-hmm. Please don't Game of Thrones it and put boobs everywhere. Tolkien was a very devout person, and don't do that to it. So there's that concern in the nerdosphere, right?
Oh, it's a huge concern. We had a poll on it on our, I don't remember, it was in a few places we put a poll, and people like blew up about it. Like hundreds of comments about it. I think it was on one of our Facebook groups that we're part of. We kind of posed that question to a group of filmmakers, and they lost it. It was crazy.
Yeah, and I'm not trying to draw false equivalency between my work and Tolkien's, but
make the comparison. It's fine.
Because I care about it the same way that his son probably cared about it, right? So, and there's a very, very small group of people that probably care about it as much. Again, likening back to the conversation that I had with Brandon a couple of years ago. Someone had asked him, "Are you? How does it feel to be famous?" And I loved his answer. He said, "I'm really famous to a very, very small number of people." And I think that's genius. In fact, just acknowledging the reality as well as humbly looking at it. But it's true is that there's a small number of people who really love my work and that write to me and buy the merch and all that kind of stuff. But it's a very small number of very passionate people, and I love them for it. But it's not that groundswell that can make the world kind of bend around you.
Right. A few years ago. Oh, Johnny, sorry. Go ahead.
I was gonna say I just love the sci-fi aspect because last time we talked, like the Battlestar Galactica feel, like I think that there needs to be out there. There's not enough that you get in Trinity's Child. You get that feeling of you're in space, but you get that emotion, you get the feel from it. It's something I think we need. So I would love it if they gave you let you control it and let Nick do the voices, even if it's a cartoon. And let Nick.
Nick would have to be in there. He'd have to be a character. That's for sure. That would be great. I wouldn't even need control. I would just want to be able to have the conversation, and be able to have it, trust a person who's gonna not try to insert things that aren't there. I think that's kind of the problem that we have with entertainment today, is that there's too many people that are trying to message rather than entertain. Mm-hmm. And it's okay. And I wrote that in one of my author's notes. I think it's great to message people, but your first responsibility in creating entertainment is to entertain. And then if someone wants to scratch beneath the surface and see some of the things that you put there for them to kind of experience or to message, then that's great. But the first thing should be, to have a great romp. And when you get a copy of Humanity's Promise, hopefully, Johnny, you'll like it even more. I honestly think it's the best thing I've written, which, I'm really happy with it, which normally I'm not. Nick will tell you, like, I don't know if this is going to be any good.
Yeah.
I mean, like when I wrote Paradigm, I was like, I don't know, Nick. I don't know. It might suck.
I love like the costumes, like every feel you had, because it's hard. Like a lot of people have never seen Farscape. Even Battlestar Galactica, they get hit and miss. But I'm like, that feeling that you get of a show it's set in space and it's set in the future or whatever. But it's human. Sometimes they go out of the way. So I like that. Want more? I just want more. I want every year, just 10 chapters. Just give it to us.
So
and Nick has promised to tell me when things are bad. So he did too. It's funny because he told me a chapter earlier. He's like, I was really worried about this was going, and then it turned in a different way. But we've gotten to the place where because his mother told him not to tell people. Tell him about your mother's advice about telling authors, or was it Erin that told you not to tell people?
I think that was my wife who had said, like, don't tell people how to write their books. I mean, they're the authors.
Yes, but for me, I gave him an exemption. He's required to tell me if I screw something up, because he's the last stop.
And I've done it on occasion. I've called you out on some things to say, like, hey, what do you think about this instead?
Yeah, and I love it. It's great.
We have a friend, his name's Lion Beckwith. He's an actor, but he was in the most recent Wonder Woman movie, and he was telling us about one of his experiences going up to a director and being like, hey, I think you should do this. And the director was just like got him off the set and everything. Like it was a
go away talent.
Yeah, exactly. It did not go over well. So I was curious, if you would take that in stride or not, but it was a pretty funny story.
Oh yeah. I mean, I'm almost impossible to insult. I mean, it's
true. I've tried.
I've tried.
Yes. It's and especially from friends, I just take it in stride, because it usually makes everything better. So I'm happy for it, because I don't finalize the manuscript till Nick and I are done, which I think is probably weird. But for the ones I can't do it with Podium, because they want the ebook and the print book out in market before the audiobook. But for the ones that Spartamac publishes, my publishing company, it's taken me 5 years to figure out the timing, but I always finalize the manuscript once we're done, because I think that's the best product, is when Nick and I have both had our hands on it.
So Nick, two quick things that I wanted to loop in real quick. One is you talked about Brandon Sanderson saying, he's very famous to a few set of people. I was at an amusement park and I saw an author. His name is Brandon Mole, who I grew up reading his work. I don't know if you've heard of him, but he was walking by, and I almost shouted at him, Brandon Moore! And I got really excited and ran up to him. I think he was kind of like, whoa, who's this random kid? Because, I mean, I wasn't a kid. I was like 24 at the time when I yelled at him. And I just shouted it at the park. Like, I saw him, and it was a kind of a reaction. So I think that's probably what you mean is, like, the people who do know you, it's, you know, you get a very visceral reaction out of. And Sanderson warns against that. He says, don't fanboy. I never listen to it. I always fanboy. When we first met Nick, I was like, Nick, I have to tell you, I've been listening to your voice for hours. Sure, it was a little overwhelming.
Nick, tell him the Aaron story with the fangirl experience.
Okay. So awesome. there was a teen book festival that I went to, and one of the organizers was very familiar with my work. And when she came up to my wife and I, and Aaron and I were fairly newly married at this point. This was pretty early in our marriage. But she came up to us and was introducing herself. And like, I'm such a big fan. And she turns to my wife and says, how do you stand living with him? That must be so amazing. And my wife just very deadpan looks at her and says, I manage.
I'm gonna humble him real quick here.
Yeah. Oh no, my wife is great. She is the quiet cheerleader, where she definitely encourages me and builds me up, but she also makes sure that when my head's getting a little too inflated, she just takes a pin and pops that balloon, just to keep me grounded.
That's so awesome.
Yeah. We both married up, that's for sure.
We did. We married above our pay grade.
I was going to tell you, Nick, as someone who's just a dog chasing cars at times, I was looking up who some of the creators of the last Skyrim were, because I'm going to go ahead and send out an email like, hey, here's who you should hire to do some of the voices for the new Skyrim. Nick Podehl. He needs to be in it. So I've begun that process. Scrolls. Yeah, that'll be one of our...
Because Bethesda, they'll probably release it sometime around 2050. Right. Which will be just about the time that you have, you can schedule them in.
Mm-hmm.
About the same time we need to have a interstellar spaceship, otherwise we'll be blown up. So
that's right. We only got till 2045.
Yeah. And so new Skyrim, we can play it before the Earth ends, so we're good.
Exactly.
I would be okay with that if I don't make it to,
That's how I want it to go. One last time with the new Skyrim.
But I am. I'm going to complain about how some of the voices were the same. Why is the shopkeeper the same voice as the guardsman at I don't know, at Solitude? So I think Nick Podehl should take one of those roles. We could see
Robert write the lines for it.
Off-brand Quoth in there as one of the bards. Just a little nod. Doesn't need to be Quoth, but I'm just saying. I'm in the works of trying to snowball that. We'll get it going on Reddit. Right. We'll get the petitions.
Red hair. And yep.
I feel like the more you ask, sometimes the more like creators are like, no, I'm not doing that. Like, you see some of these huge polls online.
George Martin's like that. Yeah. There's a great meme years ago where it's like every time you ask George Martin when book whatever it is coming out, he kills another Stark.
I love that so much.
Yeah, I went to the first Comic-Con I went to in San Diego in 2017, and one of them looked just like Martin. And we're like, hey, Martin. He's like, who's your favorite character? And we're like, no. And then he ran away because he was going to kill him off. So we're like, no. That's the only thing he said. Who's your favorite character? Really creepy. And we're like, oh, no.
Was it Martin, or was it a Martin lookalike?
I mean, it was Comic-Con, so coin.
Johnny's like, I think it was him, but who's to say? So we've taken about a little more than an hour of your time, so we can start wrapping up. But let's get into some shameless plugs. Nick, Robert, give us some shameless plugs. What should we be checking out? And part of that, Robert, I really wanted to have you do an elevator pitch for each of your series, maybe just a 30-second YouTube clip that I can put up on our page of, buy this book, here's an elevator pitch.
Okay.
So shameless plugs and elevator pitches. That's what I got.
Oh, gosh.
I'll go first. I'll go first because I'm going to shamelessly plug a book that just came out this Tuesday called A Scion of Amber Light. It is book 6 in the Sentinels of Creation series. Awesome book. You would probably find it in the urban fantasy or possibly contemporary fantasy genre. No, it is a fantastic book. I am incredibly dreading the fact that this is the second to the last book, because I love these characters and I'm not sure what I'm going to do without them. So Robert's either going to have to start writing some more things that take place in this world, like he's hinted at in some of his author's notes with stories about Shannon and Megan and some of these other major characters that readers and listeners want to know more about. So that one hits stores on Tuesday. So go out and get it.
Well, that was a shameless plug for my stuff. What about your stuff?
No, it's my stuff too.
I guess it's our
my stuff too, right?
That's right. Okay. All right. So shameless plug, and what are the two series about? So I don't have to shamelessly plug that because the book that just came out, Nick just plugged. But I would say start with the first book, not the sixth one. It'll probably be confusing if you start with 6. So I have 2 series out currently, and a novella. And I'll tie the novella in a second. So the first series is Sentinels of Creation. 6 books are in market now, and it's a urban fantasy where, if you think about going from the dawn of creation to today, that classic struggle between light and dark, order and chaos is the structure in mind, and an agnostic / atheist guy who never would have thought that he would have experienced the supernatural is given the capability to kind of alter some of the foundation aspects of creation, and he gets the role of God's unchecked hand on the world. And as the series progresses, you start to see that there is a long game being played. And that the adversary that you think is the adversary isn't really, and that it all comes to a head in the 7th book. But ultimately, it's kind of a love story, while not being a romantic book, between Kellen and the female character, primary female character Shannon, and the world kind of revolves around their growing together. And taking on that role as God's unchecked hand on the world, and trying to defend it from kind of destruction that is coming for it. So that's Sentinels of Creation. And Paradigm 2045 is a sci-fi. It's a near. There it is. Is a near. I think I have a copy here. There it is. Yeah. Near future. There you go. Still shiny. It's a near future sci-fi book set in 2045, and it's based on the premise of, if species were to split the atom, which if they're assuming there are multiple species, so we probably would all figure that out. If you had 100 years to demonstrate faster than light travel after you split the atom, or those who preceded you in that capability exterminated your species, what would that last 6 months look like as you were running out of time to demonstrate that the human race was ready to join the community of species in our Milky Way galaxy? And that's pretty much what Paradigm 2045 is about. So whereas the Sentinels of Creation is spread out over 7 years, both in terms of my production time, and the story. Paradigm 2045 is spread out over about a year. So the first book is about 90 days, and the second, or 6 months rather, the second book is about 90 days, and then the last book is going to be about a year of character time. And so Sentinels of Creation is 7 books, and the Paradigm 2045 is 3. And I'll make a little bit of news. The epilogue for Paradigm 2045's third book, which will be called Omandi's Demon. The epilogue of that will smash into the last book or epilogue of Sentinels of Creation. So those two universes converge in the epilogue of Paradigm 2045 Omandi's Demon in, God willing, August of 2022.
Very nice.
That's amazing.
Spoiler warning.
There you go.
Science and magic unite. Well, I have this huge backlog of books. So I finished Paradigm 2045. I have not started Sentinels of Creation, mostly because I've got about 7 books in my Audible account right now that I need to burn through. Thankfully, I'm on vacation, so I'm getting through them. But that's the next one on my list.
Don't listen to him at 2 times speed. Nick does not do well as Chippendale.
I think the highest I can go is 1.25. Otherwise, I just get a headache. So you don't need to worry about that. I will say of Paradigm 2045, I've been toying with the idea of writing a book for forever, but I just can't get over the fact that it's a cool concept that humanity has split an atom, but hasn't done all these other, why haven't we learned how to terraform the earth, or why haven't we learned how to do all these other interesting things? It's kind of a cool concept you've put into my head of just isn't that interesting? It was almost like this was the route we took, not,
Figure it out, Earthlings, come on.
Yeah, I don't know. I thought that was a really cool sci-fi premise that, here I don't know, we have so many limits that we haven't broken through, but that was one of the ones that we broke through in the 40s. It's come on, guys.
Yeah. It's interesting how that comes to you sometimes from a writing perspective. That was the kernel of the idea. Is that if you don't learn how to create a diaspora for your species within 100 years, but you have been able to create and unleash the ultimate destructive force, then you're likely to be a destructive element on the galaxy. So we're just going to wipe you out before you become a problem. So, Trinity nuclear test, the clock starts ticking. 100 years, you're out. So that was just the foundation of it, just that tiny kernel of an idea.
And I love there's a scene where one of these ambassadors for the planet killers, who are the testers, asks one of the main characters in the beginning, "Have you achieved interstellar travel?" That's my best attempt at Nick's voice. The creator, or this Damien character, the main force in the book, says, "No, I'm a little short on I can't remember what he says. I'm a little short
fresh out of warp drives.
I'm a little fresh out of warp drives." I love that line so much.
Come on, Nick. Monkey dance. Give us a Damien. Fresh out of warp drives.
Nope, you're gonna have to go listen to it.
Yeah,
and you really should. Listen to it. As a shameless.
He's much better businessman than I am. Look at him. You gotta go buy the book. So much better businessman than me.
I can edit his voice in doing it. Anyway, don't sue me, Robert, when I do that. When I put just a 5-second clip in, no suing us. But
I don't sue people.
As Nick said, it really is a good book. It pulled me in. As I listened to it, they were doing, they were being chased by the government in planes, and I was actually traveling when I first started listening to it. So I was on a plane listening to them being tried to be shot down and stuff at certain points. Spoiler warning. And I was sweating in this plane. I was wearing a mask. I was attending a funeral, so I was wearing a mask, and I was just anxious as can be, sweating. I couldn't breathe very well. Listening to this book on a full
you were
plane.
Popular.
Yeah, no. Thankfully, it was my wife next to me, but I think everyone else was like, "What is wrong with this guy?" It's a condition, everyone. No, but I think, Johnny, do you have any final notes for us?
Yeah, no, I recommend it to everyone because it hits a very good, and I always point this out today, there's a sci-fi bubble out there. There's a hole. We need it. And it's enough that it's realistic. Sometimes sci-fi is too far ahead, and you're like, you know what? It's sci-fi that makes sense. Then I like that a lot. It's not ooh, it's a laser beams coming out of here. And I'm like, oh no, it's something realistic or attainable within our lifetimes. So I always tell people I like it a lot.
There's no Klingons or Kryptonians, although there's elements of that. It's not to that level yet. Yeah. The first book especially is very realistic, and yeah.
It's relatable as much as it can be as a sci-fi. You're like, oh, okay, I can see that.
Robert, what was the way that you described it to me? That it was I'm going to paraphrase here, that it's the perfect blend of science fact with handwavium to explain the little bits that don't really, like, the physics doesn't make sense.
Yeah, it's I was on a panel last year with David Niven, which was Larry Niven, who was just, he's one of the founders of sci-fi. So we were talking about handwavium, right? Which is that whole "don't look at me," and in science fiction you really have to have some of it, but we were we were talking about how much is the right amount, right? Because if you don't have any, then you're looking at almost a scientific treatise, and you have to be a better writer than I am to make that interesting. And it has to be really close to home in terms of timing. So a good example, I think, of that is Andy Weir's The Martian, right? There's a lot of science in that, and it's real, right? Close to real, right? That you try to do that in my book, and it's not going to work because space is big. I didn't realize how big space was until I started doing the research for that book, and that's when I started panicking and telling Nick, I think I may read a horrible book, because you have to get places. Otherwise, like, the entire book is you sitting on your ship, and getting a year older because you've gotten nowhere. I mean, you have no idea. So in the Humanity's Children, or Humanity's Promise, I actually, and my wife didn't like this part of the chapter, by the way, I put into context how fast you have to go to get anywhere, right? By putting in context, if in our current technology, if it weren't for Damien Howard, it would be 24,000 years before we get there, and we're going to be there in 3 days, wherever it was. The beta people have their work ahead of them to make sure I didn't screw that math up. Which I did it like 5 times, and I was like, all right, I think I got the math right. But so you have to figure out how to get places. So that's my hand waving. I really limited my hand waving to travel. Everything else in the book is real, because I researched how shielding would work, crystal and aluminum, how would that work for being able to see through something that could hold out vacuum, and hold in pressure. Railguns, how they work with depleted uranium that are then accelerated to speed. If you get hit with depleted uranium, you're going to have a hole in your ship. So all of those types of things was which is really the difference between fantasy and sci-fi, which makes, I think, sci-fi harder in some respects. Fantasy is easier in that respect, but harder in that the consistency of your magic system is hard. You have to maintain that. Whereas in sci-fi, the consistency of your magic system is constrained by physics, right? So your constraints exist. You have to figure out how to get around them. Whereas in magic, your constraint is you get around them and don't keep track of your own rules. And then you get in trouble because your fans will tell you that you're an idiot.
Not today, Robert. I believe you're wrong, sir.
I've had that. I've had that conversation. And I was like, well, you're paying more attention than I am. In fact, one person corrected me, and their punishment was they're now in beta reading.
That's what you get.
That'll teach you. And so he'll probably correct my writing. That's me. I was like, so now if it's wrong next time, it's your fault.
I like
That's
it.
right.
There'll always
we actually
be
had someone call
that.
us out on Instagram once about you guys only do memes on Star Wars, and we're like, excuse you? We have authors and narrators, so we put them on our cast and shut them down a few times. So we're like, that's what you get. You make fun of us, we'll put you on our podcast.
Well, I think we'll close out. I don't know, Nick, if you want to do a little bonus or not. I know you've got a family and a life. So do you, Robert. I shouldn't say it like that. I just meant Nick was offered to show us his
I'm
nerd
old.
world.
It's fine.
Robert, you don't have anyone that cares about you, but Nick, we're concerned about your time. No, but we will close out this portion of the cast. Any final words for us, Johnny?
It's our first ever panel, in a sense. So we're super happy it was with you guys. We were we wanted to. We were like, who we're gonna do it with, and we're like, Robert and Nick made our summer, so we're like, we're gonna beg and plead for these guys to be our first ever Deadlight Nerd panelists. So we're happy.
Well, you always remember your first time, and I'm glad I could be yours.
I was wondering if anyone else was catching that Freudian thread Johnny was spinning. I was like,